Hey everyone, I'm working to hit 1,000 subscribers and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy the content, hit that subscribe button right now. Don't just think about it, actually do it. Because we've got a jersey giveaway waiting for this community once we cross that milestone, and every single one of you watching right now is the reason we get there. Now let's talk about what just happened. Because Broncos country, I have some crow to eat, and honestly, I'm enjoying every single bite. Because that was a Broncos win. Not a close one. Not a nervy one. A controlled, dominant, borderline suffocating win over the Atlanta Falcons, and by the time this game wrapped up, there were players who spent the entire week getting doubted, criticized, and picked apart who walked off that field having answered every single question with an exclamation point. Let's get into everything that went down, position by position, because there is a lot to talk about. Let's start with the obvious storyline, the one that's going to dominate Broncos Twitter for the next week straight, Courtland Sutton. I've got to be honest with you right off the top, because that's what this channel is built on. All week long, the narrative building around this team was that Sutton had been taking practices off, that maybe the Broncos were quietly phasing him out of the offense, that the writing might be on the wall for the veteran wide receiver. I said some of that myself on this very channel. And tonight, Courtland Sutton took that entire narrative, wadded it up, and threw it directly back in my face, and I could not be happier about it. A deep shot down to the 1-yard line, contested at the absolute highest level, and Sutton comes down with a one-handed grab that might be the single best catch I have seen from him in years. Not one of the best. Might be the best. The ball adjustment, the concentration, the hand strength to secure it with defenders draped all over him, that's not a player who's fading. That's not a player getting phased out. That's a bona fide WR1 reminding an entire fan base exactly why he's still the heartbeat of this receiving corps. Courtland, my man, I owe you an apology, and I'm giving it to you right here on this channel. That performance was outstanding from start to finish. Now let's talk about the man throwing him that ball, because Jarrett Stidham also deserves an apology from yours truly. There's been a growing chorus, myself included at times, saying I might have been too hard on Stidham this offseason. Tonight, he made that criticism look foolish. 9 of 15 passing, 131 yards, a touchdown, and a passer rating over 110. Now look, I'll give you the appropriate context. He was working against a lot of Atlanta's second and third string secondary pieces, so we have to season this appropriately. But it's not just the numbers that stood out to me, it's the way he carried himself in that pocket. He looked controlled. He looked calm. He didn't look jittery. He didn't look like a guy playing scared for his roster spot. He didn't look like he was dancing around back there trying to force something to happen. He looked like a quarterback who trusted his eyes, trusted his protection, and just played free, confident football. Every single element of Stidham's performance tonight screamed, I know exactly what I'm doing out here, and that's exactly what you want to see from a guy competing for QB2 reps. And speaking of that battle, Sam Ehlinger also had himself a solid night. Was it quite as sharp as Stidham's outing? I'd lean no, but again, context matters. Ehlinger actually got the benefit of better personnel around him tonight working with some of the higher string weapons, whereas Stidham was pushing through with the 4s and 5s. So when you flip that context, Ehlinger's performance holds up really well too. He flashed his athleticism on a couple of nice ARPO scrambles, moved the offense efficiently, and didn't put the ball in harm's way. Honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if the coaching staff flips the script next week and has Ehlinger start with the 1s while Stidham comes in with the 2s, just to get a clean, apples-to-apples look at both guys under different circumstances. This QB2 competition remains one of the most fascinating subplots of this entire preseason, and I promise you, we are tracking every single snap of it. Now let's talk about the run game, because this might have been the most complete, balanced offensive showing we've seen from this coaching staff in a long time. It started with Davis Webb's commitment to running the football under center. I cannot stress enough how much I loved this. All the play-action concepts, the willingness to stick with the ground game even when it wasn't breaking off for huge chunk plays, that commitment paid off in the form of a genuinely more efficient offense from snap one. This wasn't an offense settling for empty, predictable drop-back after drop-back. This was an offense with an identity, and that identity showed up on the stat sheet. Rage Harvey opened the game at running back and looked outstanding. He was noticeably more physical between the tackles than a lot of fans, myself included, might have expected heading in. This wasn't a scatback running scared of contact. This was a downhill, decisive runner who wanted the football. And then, once again, the story of the night on the ground was rookie Jonah Coleman. This kid spun out of multiple tackles, and his contact balance is honestly some of the best I've seen from a rookie running back in recent memory. There was one run in particular, his third carry of the night, a gain of about 13 or 14 yards, where he took a hit, spun completely out of the tackle attempt, and kept his legs churning like he'd been doing this in the league for half a decade. That's exactly what Sean Payton has been trying to tell everybody all camp. This kid does not look like a rookie. And after back-to-back performances like this, I'm inclined to fully agree. You are going to see a lot more from Jonah Coleman as this preseason rolls on and as this team gets closer to Week 1. Now, was the offense as explosive in the second half as it was early? Not quite, but that's exactly what you'd expect once the starters came off the field and this game had already been decided by halftime. A little bit of conservative play calling down the stretch isn't a red flag, it's just situational football. I'm not remotely concerned about it. All right, before we dive into the defense, and trust me, we've got even more apologies to hand out on that side of the ball, I've got to give a shout out to the sponsor of today's breakdown, our friends over at Prize Picks. This remains my favorite way to add a little extra juice to watching Broncos football, and here's why. You can win up to 2,000 times your cash while just enjoying the game like you normally would. Full transparency, my lineup didn't hit tonight. Stidham cashed for me, but neither Hakeem Butler nor Zachariah Branch came through. But that's exactly why you build smart, balanced lineups. And credit where it's due, the Broncos' defense was so stifling tonight that betting against Atlanta's skill players was clearly the right instinct. If you want to run it back with a similar strategy, you can copy lineups directly through the new social feed feature in the app with a single click. But more importantly, if you're not already on Prize Picks, here's your move. Sign up using code MA. Play your first $5 lineup, and if that lineup hits, you'll walk away with $150 in bonus lineups. $5 in, $150 in bonus plays out if you're right. That's an incredible way to get started. Everything you need, the code, the link, all of it is sitting right there in the comments and description of today's video. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. Okay, now let's get into the defense, because this might have been the most complete unit performance we've seen from this team all preseason, and I've got some real amends to make with a couple of our cornerbacks. Let's start with Jahdae Barron. I have been on this guy all camp long about needing to be stickier in coverage, and tonight he went out and directly answered that criticism. The tipped pass off the hands of Carney Reed that fell right into Barron's lap for a pick six was an absolute thing of beauty, right place, right time. And enough closing speed to turn it into 6 points before the Falcons even knew what hit them. But here's the part that actually matters more to me long-term. He nearly had a second interception just minutes before he came off the field, dropping a ball that should have been his. That's not a fluke. That's a player who looked genuinely stickier in coverage than anything we'd been hearing about out of training camp reports. And on top of the coverage instincts, the tackling and closing speed we already knew he had were on full display all night. He was everywhere. Genuinely one of the best performances on the entire field tonight from our former first-round pick. and I've got no problem saying I misjudged where he was at heading into this game. And then there's Riley Moss, who also had himself a night to remember. A tipped ball at the line by Malcolm Roach fell right into his hands for another interception, and the sideline lost it. Riley looked athletic, looked sticky in coverage, and honestly looked like a legitimate number 2 cornerback tonight. Now, I know exactly what's coming in the comments, Moose. It's preseason, calm down. It's just the 2s and 3s out there. And to that I say, part of the entire point of the preseason is watching how dominant your starters look against whoever's lined up across from them. And tonight, the Broncos secondary allowed next to nothing. In fact, if it weren't for a fumble deep in Atlanta's own red zone from the return game, Denver might have walked away with a full shutout. I am not remotely concerned about that performance. It was excellent from top to bottom. Now let's touch on the defensive line, because the pass rush deserves real credit here too. The sack numbers might not blow you away on paper. Really just 1 or 2 officially, with one of those coming almost by accident when an Atlanta lineman tripped over his own feet, and Drew Sanders coming through with a legitimate sack of his own. Shout out to number 41 for that one. But sacks are only part of the story. What stood out to me all night was the sheer amount of pressure this front generated, forcing errant throws and rush decisions that never show up cleanly in a box score but absolutely show up on tape. Malcolm Roach in particular deserves a massive thumbs up tonight. His ability to get those hands up at the line of scrimmage and bat down throws was sensational to watch, and the defensive line as a whole looked buttoned up against both the run and the pass. Nick Bonito and Jonathan Cooper both generated consistent pressure up front, and Saivion Jones chipped in with a couple of disruptive plays of his own. Genuinely across the board, this defensive front played one of its cleanest, most complete games of the summer. And I can't wrap up the defensive side of the ball without mentioning Drew Sanders, who made his presence felt all night. A quarterback hit, a sack, a tackle for loss, 2 total tackles on the stat sheet. For a guy who's fighting to lock down a roster spot, that's exactly the kind of performance you want to see from a bubble candidate. It's a great reminder that these preseason reps genuinely matter, not just for the guys who are locks to make the 53, but for the players fighting for practice squad spots and depth roles who need every single opportunity to put good tape on film. So let's talk bottom line, because if I'm being completely honest with you, there were really only 2 negative takeaways from the entire night, and even those come with a pretty significant asterisk. First, there were too many penalties. I'd much rather see that get cleaned up now, in the preseason, than carry those bad habits into a game that actually counts in Week 1. Second, special teams wasn't as sharp as it could have been. 2 missed field goals, 1 that got blocked outright, and 1 where the operation simply took too long to get set, forcing a rushed kick that never had a real chance. Neither of those issues is disqualifying. Clean up the penalties, tighten up the operation on special teams, and this team genuinely does not have a hole to point to right now. So here's where I land on all of this. The Broncos controlled this game from start to finish. Courtland Sutton silenced every doubter, myself included, with one of the best catches of his career. Jarrett Stidham looked poised and in command. Jonah Coleman continues to look like anything but a rookie. And a secondary that had question marks swirling around it all camp long nearly pitched a shutout, headlined by a pick 6 from Jahdae Barron and a momentum-shifting interception from Riley Moss. If this is what controlled looks like for this roster in the preseason, I genuinely cannot wait to see what this team looks like once the games actually start to count. All right, my friends, that's the breakdown. Drop a comment below and let me know, who was your player of the game? Was it Sutton silencing the doubters? Was it Barron's pick 6? Or are you still riding with Riley Moss as the real story of the night? I want to hear it, so get down in those comments. And while you're down there, smash that like button. It genuinely helps this channel more than you know. If you're new here, welcome to the family and make sure you get subscribed. because we cover every single Broncos game, all 17 regular season matchups, plus every step of the playoffs if this team makes the run we all believe it can make. We are closing in on 1,000 subscribers, and every single one of you watching right now gets us that much closer to a jersey giveaway for this entire community. Until next time, Broncos country, mile high salute. Let's keep this thing rolling.